Welcome. This meeting is now called to order. The roll has been taken. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome new members to the Heritage Committee, Nicholas Waldy and Nathan Etherington. And if each of the members would like to share why you decided to join our Heritage Committee. All right, Nicholas isn't here today. Nathan?
I know a lot of local history, not only
Do
really
you have the recipe?
the county of Brantford as well, so came to continue that knowledge that I have in share.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. And all committee members we can go over and introduce ourselves. Hopefully Nicholas is here in the January meeting. Also, the long agenda tonight. I thought that's a better way to do things. This meeting is held in hybrid format in accordance with Article 18 of the city's procedural bylaw. Staff and delegates participating virtually are reminded to keep their video and microphones off until requested by the chair or members of the committee. All cameras for virtual committee members shall remain on to ensure quorum. All members of the committee will vote by a physical show of hands. Please leave your hand raised until the chair has determined the result of the vote. In the event a connection service interruption occurs that affects quorum, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting would be adjourned. Is there any declarations of conflicts of interest at this time? Dan?
4.4 Crystal Cottage designation. I guess I'm looking for direction if I have to leave during that part or if I can stay.
Through the chair, the process for that would be before the item is called by the chair. You can leave the room, and then once the item is disposed by the committee, you're welcome to join us.
And Pat?
4.3 Myrtle Bill.
And I also have a conflict of interest in Myrtleville as well. All right, there are no presentations or delegations tonight. And item for consideration is 4.1 Heritage Impact Assessment for the Downtown Streetscaping Project. I'll now call upon city staff to speak to this item. As a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Okay, thank you to the chair. Good evening. Thank you for having us today. My name is Gagan Batra. I am the manager of business support and sustainability with the city, and I have other members of our project here who will introduce themselves as well. I'll start with a brief overview of where we're at and just some background, and other staff can take it from there. You might recall a couple of years ago, the city initiated a project for downtown streetscaping. We initiated an environmental assessment. And through that process, we were looking at redoing the underground and above ground infrastructure in downtown Brantford. And as part of that environmental assessment process, we did bring a report to the Heritage Committee talking about how we would ensure that there were no negative impacts to the heritage. So that was a very high level study at that time. And since then, we have completed about 50% of the detailed design. So I will pass it off to Jennifer Elliott, our city's Director of Engineering Services, and she will talk a little bit about where we're at right now.
Good evening. Thank you, everybody. Jennifer Elliott, Director of Engineering Services with the City of Brantford, through the chair. So the project for the downtown revitalization project has begun. We are working through the detailed design at the moment. We are at about a little over 50%. The 75% submission package should be received this week. We are moving into phased construction. So you will see in 2025, we will be releasing for tender. doing some construction on Brant Ave and ICOM Drive. In 2026, we will move in. We're anticipating some of the internal side streets in 2026 and then moving in through doing Colburn and Dalhousie. But that phasing is still being worked out and defined, and we will advise and update our project's website at that time. So through this construction project, we are doing full reconstruction. That is all of the sanitary sewers, storm sewers, water mains, as well as streetscaping along the roadway. So you will see new asphalt, new curbs, new fixtures like poles, street lighting, hardware, street furniture, things along those lines, going all the way from the right of way into the roadway. So the heritage report that you see before you today, that includes some assessments on the archaeological work and requirements that are required in that area. That includes that there's a definition of an archaeological potential zone. So we will have construction monitors there, which is Six Nations, Mississaugas of the Credit, as well as our archaeological consultant as we are doing that work within that defined area. So that's general overview of the project. It goes all the way from Brant Ave to Clarence Street and as well as down ICOM Drive. We have our consultant, Meredith Stewart from ASI, that would give a brief description and breakdown on the heritage report.
Good evening. Thank you, Jennifer and Gagan. I do have some slides that I'm not sure that I'm able to share. So I'll just maybe proceed without anyway. So a bit of background, you've had broad project background, but some background on specifically the heritage work that's been completed to date. So in 2022, a cultural heritage assessment report was completed by ARA as part of the MCEA process. And so that study area for the project went from roughly, went along Colburn and Dalhousie streets between Brant Ave and Polston Street or Cowans's Way. And that project resulted in identifying 204 built heritage resources and 6 cultural heritage landscapes that were compiled into an inventory. And at that time, a recommendation that came out of that 2002 report was that an HIA would be completed once there was a preferred alternative and detailed design, and that work had begun. So we're essentially at the point where we now have detailed designs. And so ASI, the firm that I work for, I'm a cultural heritage specialist and project manager with ASI. And we have now completed the HIA as part of this recommendation and as part of the detailed design. So the area that we were looking at was a bit of a smaller study area than the one that was assessed in 2022. So this only goes from Brant Ave to Clarence, but still includes Colburn and Dalhousie and then the sort of cross streets that come between. And so this HIA is sort of different than a typical one, which is usually a property-specific HIA. This one's a project-wide assessment. So it's looking at all of the properties that are adjacent to that study area where these improvements are happening and assessing the impacts to any properties that have known or potential cultural heritage value or interest within that study area or adjacent to the study area. So without visuals cueing myself, I have to use my notes. So what we did as part of this HIA was we looked at the inventory compiled in 2022, looked to see if the heritage register had changed, if any properties had fallen off, if any had been added, if any needed to be added from assessing from the street, if there were any changes in integrity to properties. And so as a result, we in the new study area have 48 built heritage resources and 5 cultural heritage landscapes that were identified that were adjacent to the study area that were part of this impact assessment. And so looking at the impact assessment, we're considering direct and indirect impacts that may be a result of the proposed work. And in reviewing the detailed design that we were provided, we had the sort of 25%. So things have continued to advance as we were looking at impacts. But essentially what we've determined is that we aren't anticipating any direct impacts to any of the properties. There may be some indirect impacts through vibration. And so we're recommending as a mitigation measure, vibration monitoring that would happen as part of the detailed design process and would carry forward through construction phase. There is some potential for some of the cultural heritage landscapes we've identified, mostly along towards Brant Avenue, where there's properties that have plantings and vegetation and things like that, that there be to ensure that none of those plantings would be disturbed as part of the process. So we've recommended that temporary fencing, establishing no-go zones and buffer zones be issued, and the construction zones, the construction crews know where heritage properties are located, so that none of those plantings or the buildings themselves or features or monuments be impacted. But to boil it all down, essentially, we're not identifying anything, we're not seeing anything that would be adverse to the buildings or any heritage attributes at this time. So I think that's as quickly as I can say all of that.
Okay, thank you. Alright, may I please have a mover and a seconder on the motion for us? Moved by Zeb and seconded by Pat. And and is there any discussions or questions of staff? Yeah,
Don't say it like that.
sorry.
For the vibration reports or looking into vibration, is there going to be any pre-assessments on the buildings beforehand to tell if there's a difference during and after the project?
I can answer that. Again, through the chair, my apologies. I didn't catch the name through the question, but so we do typically do pre-condition surveys of all the properties in and around our construction zones. So there's a sub-consultant or a subcontractor, sorry, that's put through the construction tender, and they do pre-condition surveys. So then they would go, they would notify the resident, the homeowner, the property owner, they would enter in, take photographs, and have documentation for each address.
Don't see anyone else has a question. Oh, that first. Sorry. Through the chair, this is a question for Jennifer. I'm wondering, could you please elaborate upon the archaeological component of the work to take place?
No, for sure. So through the EA, there was an archaeological assessment completed. There were some properties and some areas that were identified within that report. So there are a couple of properties like Prominence Point, if you are familiar with that, where there's it's the city of Brantford, kind of the Walk of Fame that has a monument there between Colborne and Dalhousie and Brant Ave. That area was identified, as well as a property further down past Market Street. That was identified for additional archaeological investigations if we will be going into those properties and disturbing them. So through the detailed design, we are staying outside of those properties. So we're not going to be impeding those properties and needing to do further deep archaeological investigations. There is an area identified within the roadway that travels on Colborne Street from about Dalhousie up just past Queen Street, I believe. That's identified as a significant area. And so while we are doing construction, we are required to have archaeological monitoring there. So we will have field monitors and we will have agreements set up with Six Nations and Mississaugas of the Credit, and our archaeologist, my apologies, it's a long word, will be on site as well while we're working through that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else that has any questions? Nathan?
You mentioned, building off of Bev said, you mentioned archaeology. I noticed on one of the figures that Wharf Street as well is in the study area. Is there work that's occurring on Wharf Street? And is that similarly going to, you know, have those same archaeological protections around it?
Mhm. So there is work that's going to be required on Wharf Street. That's bringing some of the sewers down and around, pardon me, off of Colburn Street. That has not been identified as a significant area to require field monitors. However, it has been looked through from that area.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else that has first time questions? No? All right, Dan, second time?
So once we get past the sewer lines and the water lines and we get up on top of the streetscape part of it, is there gonna be any collaboration or anything with the Heritage Committee to be able to do some signage for the heritage properties that we're in front of, to be able to tell the story of those buildings? Whether it's plaques or something that we just have the opportunity right now to add those things while we're doing this project? Was there any consideration to that?
I can maybe start, Jen, if you want to add something on top of this through the chair. Thank you for the question. We have been talking about this internally, about the way to go about engaging the community for the types of signage and other things that they want to see in the downtown. We haven't gotten that far yet. When Jen says we're at 50% design, a majority of this project is underground. So we're about 50% design for the underground work. We haven't really touched the above ground and the different elements we're going to be putting there. We haven't gotten that far. However, we do have a staff member who we brought on board to kind of lead the engagement process once we get to those questions. So not sure. Oh, there's Lindsay. She just turned on her camera. So Lindsay is our downtown revitalization ambassador. And part of her role will be to conduct that internal and external engagement to determine things like signage. So if we determine today that signage is one piece that we should look at, staff can absolutely take that back and look at how we incorporate that. So feel free to send your comments in, speak them now, we'll take them down, and we'll make sure that we circle back when we get to that point in the study.
Is there any other questions or comments? No? All right. In that case, okay. So if Heritage Committee then has any recommendations, comments, advice, now's a good time. Beth.
Comment with regards to one of the recommendations that was in the 2022 ARA report. It suggested, or it made reference to the moccasin identifier project, which Carolyn King has been initiating out of Mississauga the Credit. And given that there's a significant archaeological site on the south side of Colburn Street, I think it would be fitting to have some identifier relating to that site, and the moccasin identifier project would be a good candidate for that.
Sorry, through the chair, can you repeat the street that you mentioned?
Colburn Street
Okay.
and the location of the YMCA.
So I have two comments. Building off of what Dan said, I think we should make a comment that heritage tracking is considered for the surface streetscape design, so that we already have a way of doing that as the construction proceeds. My other comment is with regards to 48 Dalhousie Street. It was mentioned in the report, and it has lost heritage attributes. in between. It's a Tudor building and the wood was removed from it. And so my comment would be that 48 Deleuze, the changes to 48 Deleuze Street show the need for heritage protection in these areas.
Is there any other comments or things that you would like to have included in that? All right, I don't see anyone else. All right, so then I would be seeking a vote on this item and all those, oh, hang on one sec. Are you able to bring that up? Just,
I can't, but it's not his job, so if you want to.
does the committee want to see that before we vote on that?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Sorry, through the chair, the three comments that I have is the inclusion of an identifier on Colburn Street near the YMCA. The suggestion of inclusion of that. It mentioned that on the street that Nathan mentioned, and the fact that 48 Houses Street shows the need of heritage protection. The need of heritage attributes on the property.
Need for heritage protection because
Heritage protection in this area, right?
of the removal of the heritage attributes.
And
Heritage protection in this area.
yes, and then the one that Bev had, that one specifically was identifying the archaeological, you said the moccasin project?
Yeah.
So we can include that as well.
Okay. All right, so everyone knows what we're, oh,
No, I just had a question. So for the one that was in relation to Dan's comment and what Nathan had said, how do you have that worded again, sorry? The one about the heritage plaque, how do you have it worded?
On that street, on that, I don't know if you guys want to make it more specific.
I think it should be broader than that, just in case there's, like, I don't want to limit to specifically anything, just that we review or the option or the opportunity for heritage plaquing within the downtown streetscaping. Just because if something else comes up, it'd be nice to be able to add it if there was a possibility of that, so I'd like to see that captured that way.
Dan, are you okay with that?
I think we're good with that. All right, so in that case, all those in favor? Show those hands. And any opposed? And that passes unanimously. All right, so item 4.2 is the heritage impact assessment for 97 Wellington Street / 81 George Street. And I will ask Dan Kraszewski, hopefully I said that right. From
Yes.
DJK. Thank you. From DJK Land Use Planning, Manny Singh Tour and Gurpreet Singh Grover to come forward and provide comments regarding this item. And as a reminder, you have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Dan Kraszewski and I'm a land use planner working with GM developers to redevelop the what was formerly the Central Presbyterian Church at the southeast corner of Wellington and George Street. Just to give you some of the highlight details of it, the high level details, we're maintaining and repurposing the existing place of worship and adding a third story addition to the gym portion of the building. We consider this to be a sympathetic renovation of the existing place of worship. And the result of this project will be to create 28 residential units, which we anticipate will be used for student residence. In terms of how we got here, I'll just kind of give you a bit of the history of the process. We submitted for pre-consultation for site plan approval, and we got those comments, and then we submitted for site plan approval. And we've also submitted for minor variance. And of course, the pre-consultation and the minor variance applications have been approved and completed. And we're still in the site plan application process. So how we got here in terms of what you see in front of you, when we went through the pre-consultation process, we had a concept design that showed what I would consider a little more impact on the place of worship building itself, And we were advised through that process that maybe we should go back and take a look at it and see if we can't tone down, I guess, some of the changes to the exterior of the building. And that's exactly what we did. And that's the result that you see in front of you today. The HIA report that you have was completed by GBCA Architects. And also through the process, we did complete an archaeological assessment prepared by AS&G Consulting. So those, I don't think that's before you today, but the HIA certainly is. And I think that's really the extent of what I wanted to say. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, so if we have any questions then for the delegate? Nathan?
I think I noticed in the drawings that you're changing some of the openings, the window openings, maybe adding some new window openings into it. Can you explain why those need to be changed?
Absolutely, yes, I can.
In addition of the new window openings that you're creating, why they have to be created there? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And we, like I said, we did have to change the facade from what we had originally proposed, because really what the issue now is what's happening interior with the creation of the dwelling units, and the building code requires a certain amount of windows in those in bedrooms and living rooms and so on and so forth. So what we've done and what you see on the plan is maintaining the existing windows as best we can, but adding windows to conform to the building code. So that's where we're at, and that's the reason you see additional windows in this proposal.
So the additional windows are so that you can get additional units into this building that you wouldn't otherwise be able to obtain.
Well, when we lay out the interior layout to get the proper size bedrooms and living rooms and kitchens, that's the way it laid out. So you have to provide windows to those uses. So for efficient layout of the interior, and really in terms of what we're proposing here, it's only 28 additional residential units. I think what we've done is come up with a pretty responsible and sympathetic renovation to the existing place of worship.
And is there anyone else that has questions for the delegate? Beth?
The windows that would be added, particularly on the north side, the long vertical windows, would they be outlined in the same manner as the existing windows, or would you be able to discern that these are different and new openings to the building?
Well, at this point, our intention is certainly to have them outlined very similar to what's existing. That's going to be our goal. I mean, you see that the form, the size, the length is similar. We'll certainly try and coordinate as best we can in terms of materials, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments? Questions of delegate? All right. In that case, thank you, by the way. May I please have a mover and a seconder on the motion then? Greg, I believe I saw you first as the mover, and Councillor Sullivan, I saw you as the seconder. All right, and in that case, any discussion, any questions of staff or committee? Nathan?
You're on comments, right?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I would echo what Bev said, that new openings done in a similar style to the existing window openings.
I had a comment. I found the report really interesting in that it included the photos of the original church that had suffered a fire. And given that this is located within a heritage district, it might be an idea to have somewhere an image reproduced to illustrate what the previous church looked like.
Is there anyone else that has any comments? All right, I think that's all the comments then. Okay. In that case, are you able to review this for us?
Yes, through the chair, the two comments that I have is from Nathan encouraged, the Brantford Heritage Committee encourages that the new openings be of the same style as the existing ones. And the second one is the inclusion of a picture of what previously, it previously was, in that place, the church, the inclusion of the photo of the church.
Is that good? Everyone knows what we're going to be voting on? Okay. In that case, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? And I see that's carried unanimously. Now, I actually have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I actually have a conflict of interest on this item, which is 4.3 regarding Myrtleville Drive. And so I'll be seeking a member of our committee who can chair this portion of the meeting. And who like wants to do that? Just kind of.
We should, so through the chair, what we can do is we can seek nominations at this time, just for somebody to chair, for a member to chair this portion of the meeting, item 4.3. Unfortunately, it only can be a member in person, not those remote. So if anybody would like to put their name forward.
I'll move Tamara.
All right, Tamara, member Chloe, would you set the nomination? No other nomination? All right. No problem.
You're one of those nights.
Let's see. Okay, so this items for the proposed alteration to 34 Myrtleville Drive. I will ask Colin McKenzie from the National Trust for Canada to come forward and provide comments regarding this item. And as a reminder, you will have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Hi, everyone. This is Colin McKenzie, the Operations Manager with the National Trust for Canada. The maintenance being proposed for the Myrtleville House Museum at 34 Myrtleville Drive includes some minor mortar replacement and repairs on the 1858 addition to the museum, as well as the installation of an aluminum cap on top of the chimney of the 1913 rental unit that's on the property as well. And beyond that, there's not really anything else that we're proposing at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members to the delegate? Sure, Nathan.
Hi, Colin. I noticed on figure 3 of our report, there's a period, some brick that you are going to be repointing. And it looks like the repair has taken far too long because the water has penetrated right down through to the foundation there. That's underneath the first layer of bricks there. So is that also going to be repaired as part of this proposal?
No, I don't believe that the mason had made us aware of that at this time. We weren't aware that it had penetrated. So that is not part of the proposed work at this time.
Okay.
Further comment, Nathan? Anybody else? Yes, yeah.
Has the building been given a full examination to see if other things need to be fixed while the masons are on site?
Pardon me, could you repeat the question, please?
Has the building been given a full examination for other repairs that need to be done as well?
Yes, we had submitted a series of repairs to for the Heritage Grant within the city of Brantford, and these were the repairs that were eligible to be moved forward with for this year. There were other repairs that we have proposed. We are also limited by our budget at this time. A complete full overhaul to repair any and every defect in the building would not be possible with our funds.
Are there is there any water getting in the building through that area?
No, there's no water damage at that area of the building. None at all in the 1858 edition.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any members? No? I'll now call on city staff. Would you like to make a presentation? Oh, sorry, yeah, wrong person. There you go. Perfect. You can probably give us a little more clarity on the dollar amounts. Oh, actually, be 100.
It's working on the grant. Thank you, Chair. So this application is for 34 Myrtleville Drive, application HA 1424. For context, the property is located north of Myrtleville Drive between Heritage Road and Balmoral Drive. The property is accessed off of Myrtleville Drive, as can be seen in the aerial on the screen. 34 Myrtleville Drive is designated by bylaw 153-81 under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. For the committee's information, on November 26, 2024, Council approved a recommendation to amend bylaw 153-81. At this time, a notice of proposed amendment has been issued to the property owner, and staff anticipate that the amended bylaw will come into effect in March. However, the amendment will not affect this heritage permit application. So the scope of this application is masonry work, which includes the mortar repointing on the rear addition of the primary or museum building and the proposed installation of a metal cap on the chimney of the second dwelling on the property. So the images on the slide were taken by staff and they show the few areas that require or where mortar repointing will occur. The applicant's mason is using a lime type N mortar that will be tinted to match the existing mortar. And it's noted that no bricks are being replaced at this time. Also included in the scope of work is the proposed installation of metal cap on the chimney you can see on the slide. So the cap will be made of aluminum and it will have a low flat profile consistent with the chimney caps on the museum building. The applicant will also be reinstalling the existing flashing base of the chimney to ensure that it is watertight. So again, the applicant has shown that they will be using the appropriate lime-based mortar and that the metal cap will be installed in a manner that will help to protect against any future water damage or moisture entry. As such, staff are recommending that the committee, this heritage permit be approved by the committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, you put the motion on the floor. If I can get a mover and a seconder for it. Dan and Councillor Sullivan. Okay, that report 2024-712 be received and that the request for the alterations be approved. Any discussion or recommendations to staff? Anything? Yes, Aidan.
I would like to amend the proposed motion to add clause C that the Heritage Committee recommends that the owner submit an additional heritage permit application to stabilize and or rehabilitate the damage to the foundation shown in figure 3 of report 2024-712. Seeking a seconder for that amendment.
Do you have any comment from the staff on that?
Through the chair, that wasn't included in the proposed alterations. With the
How is that
but-
affect-
So through the chair, so
Yeah.
the committee doesn't have sort of like subpoena powers or opportunity to direct applicants, but this is a recommendation that is well within the wheelhouse of any committee to sort of resolutions for information or whatnot, so again, this is encouraging the applicant to take action. I can add through the chair, so on various tours of the property, we were made aware of the different sort of ways the property was built out, and this addition was done by one of the goods, he did it himself. There's not a huge foundation under, or the foundation doesn't run under the entire brick addition that was sort of owner built. So this is just part and parcel of, what happens when you can build without a permit. This is not going to go away just by some exterior masonry repairs. This would be quite an involved project, so again, the committee can make the recommendation for information. That's what is proposed. And then it'll be up to the applicant if they can sort of make that project work, they can apply again in the future.
Okay. Right, yes.
I guess also another recommendation I would have to do, I guess, do some research in regards to capping the chimney to find out what the best practices are, if it should be a breathable cap or a solid cap in regards to like condensation within and rotting out bricks down below.
Yes, we're not really taking comments per se.
Through the chair, so there's a motion on the floor, which is to amend the main motion, which is to include members Etherington suggestion into the main motion. So if the mover and the seconder are okay with it, we can make it friendly. If the mover agrees with that, we can include it in here. Otherwise, we would have to deal with that motion first, vote on it, and then move on to the next one.
I'm okay to do that as well.
Yeah, so it's up to the mover and the seconder now. Is that considered friendly?
Can we add that as a clause D?
So it's
Yeah.
friendly as a clause D,
As a
just for
clause.
clarity.
So the following clauses be added, C and D.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So now the
And our
motion,
seconders okay with that too? Okay.
so through the chair, just to clarify, the motion is now for both
A, B,
comments.
C, and D.
No, we're dealing with C and D, which is the suggestion of the submission to the Brantford Heritage Committee suggests the submission of an additional permit to stabilize or rehabilitate the foundation of the building, and the suggestion of or
Chimney
the
modification.
chimney, exactly, either solid or the cap, looking into the cap.
Perfect. Okay. Can we take a vote now? Okay. On the amendments first, right? Okay,
Mhm.
so the motion as presented with the amendments,
No,
C and D, or just the friendly
Ju-
amendment,
ju-
just
ju-
the amendment to the C?
through the chair, we're only gonna vote on the amendments of C and D.
Okay, C
If
and D.
it carries,
yeah.
we'll deal with the main motion.
Okay,
Yeah.
can we add C and D? Everybody in favor? There we go. Sure, you had to make it
Yeah.
technical for me, right? Okay. So now following back to the original amendment now?
Now we're in the main
The
motion
main motion, right?
as amended,
Okay,
so
as
including C
amended.
and D. We would be voting on.
Does everybody
A,
understand what they're voting on? Okay, it's not just me, all right, okay, great, so all those in favor? Perfect, okay, that passes, thank you. We're done? All right, perfect. Wasn't more stressful than it needed to be. Thank you.
good practice, the committee. We'll see,
Yeah.
we'll see that, right?
Didn't cover that in the training.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're on 4.4, designation of 53 Charlotte Street. I will now call upon city staff to speak to this item. And as a reminder, you will have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Thank you, Chair. This is the staff presentation. We're going to be designation of 53 Charlotte Street under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So just some background. I'm sure many committee members are familiar. The Crystal Cottage used to be located at 35 Chatham Street. Through a redevelopment proposal and a zoning bylaw amendment that was approved. One of the conditions imposed through a holding symbol was if the holding would not be removed and development could not proceed until the Crystal Cottage was relocated to a new property. The Brantford Historical Society offered up 53 Charlotte Street and the Crystal Cottage was relocated. Unfortunately, this all happened during the pandemic and it's one of those sort of after effects that still lingers with us. The developer at the time entered into a separate agreement with the Brantford Historical Society about the purchase of the building. The society provided the lot, and the city had entered into agreements through the heritage demolition application with the developer. Made for somewhat a long protracted process, and when the developer went bankrupt, that complicated the restoration even further. Brantford Historical Society attempted to restore the building and ultimately sold it to the current owner. Now restoration has been completed. So as part of the direction, when the demolition was approved, staff were directed to report back to council on the designation of the receiving property. With that restoration work done, we received the request from the owners. So that's what this report is about. So we have the restored front of the Crystal Cottage as seen from Charlotte Street, and just the location map from the report. The property is located at the northeast corner of Charlotte Street and Wellington Street. There's a delay on my end, it seems. So Ontario Regulation 906 governs the designation of property under the Heritage Act. Under recent amendments, a property must meet and demonstrate 2 of the 9 criteria. There's 3 types of criteria: design value or physical value criteria, historical value and associative value, or contextual value. It's a long list, but you don't have to read the whole thing. But that requirement has moved up from 1 criterion to 2 criteria. The original designation was in 1985, and the regime was different at the time. It was historical or architectural value. So looking at the current wording in Ontario Regulation 906, staff are of the opinion that the value of the property, the new receiving property, is the same as the original, and that it's design value or physical value. We don't have any value to associate the Crystal Cottage and the owner of 53 Charlotte Street. And just given the request from the owner and their goals to have this property designated, we focus on, this was a relocation, it is understood, and there actually is a process now under the Heritage Act. If the demolition happened today, there are actually regulation sections that talk about relocating buildings and do any of those heritage attributes carry forward. So of the criteria that are met, criterion 1 is it's a multi-part criterion, but we'll go through the features that we identified in the report. So the property in this case has design or physical value because it has a unique example of material, and that truly is the case of the glass bottles that are in the course above the windows and door opening, as well as in sections below the front and would be now south side windows. The bottles are unique. We looked across the province and contacted colleagues in other municipalities who work with heritage. No one was able to find or provide an example of another property where glass bottles were used in the exterior walls. There have been cases of bottle dash, which is stucco like pebble dash, but with glass fragments amongst the pebbles as well. But no other examples where there's a course of glass bottles And we used to have a small key map or key photo showing where the bottles are located on the bottom of the front facade. We do have other photos in the report that show the full extent of the glass bottles and other heritage attributes. So criterion 1 actually, and criterion 2, sorry, is that the property is a unique example of a type, and we're saying a unique example of a cottage. It's not a Brantford cottage that you would see. Typically, it does not have the pyramidal roof. It doesn't have the common diamond or lancet or other window in the gable. There are actually some quite large examples of Brantford cottages just in terms of gross floor area. The Crystal Cottage is also not typical of a sort of larger Gothic cottage, which you might see having similar two-tone or polychromatic brickwork. This is a rather modest dwelling, but it is highly ornamental. So that makes it somewhat unique in the city. And it also has designer physical value because of its high degree of craftsmanship or artistic merit. And, that is a broad criterion, but craftsmanship can be looked at. There's different styles of architecture that celebrate knowing how to use the materials at hand. And in our opinion, that is the case with the Crystal Cottage. The name Crystal Cottage is spelled out in the gable using easily procurable materials, just pebbles, stucco rendering, and then using chestnuts to spell out the name. So each letter is actually was composed of chestnuts, and so you can still see all the impressions. I think a few of them may still survive, but many have fallen out over the year. Putting it on a curve, spacing it, there's a glass roundel and a seashell splitting the word. Again, these are little humble treatments, but the composition is what we're referring to here, the craftsmanship. We have a list of heritage attributes in the report. I've copied some of them, and the dashed lines are there you can sort of identify what we're referring to with each heritage attribute. We have ornate wooden trim, actually 3 different key features to the trim. So the fascia board on the soffits has a sort of a fleur-de-lis motif along the edge. Inside that, within the gable, there's a verge board with an ivy or vine-like tracery cut out, and then even the edge, that little lancet arch that's formed in the Crystal Cottage's gable by the wood trim is further embellished with little round sort of carvings, almost like a lace-like effect. So sort of every inch of that gable work was put into that. And there are also 2 ornate brackets that support the front gable. It also has wooden shutters and original wooden windowsills. There's also the masonry work. There is, of course, the sort of the namesake, the glass bottle course, and that runs on both sides and front of the building. The dichromatic brick walls, so the red brick courses. Again, the builder understood the material they were working with. Aside from needing closer bricks at the corners of the front and side walls, the rest of the bottle course is essentially uninterrupted on the walls it runs on. The red bricks are also used to highlight various points on the facade. So they're immediately below the eaves. There's the 3-course red running brick, and then the edge bricks, again, trying that sort of break that emphasizes the bottom of the eaves. The red bricks to call out the bottles. Red bricks to call out the tops and bottoms of each opening. And then we can't see in this photo just because of the planting of the evergreen bushes, but red bricks also surround the glass bottles below each set of windows. So the builder knew the material they were working with. The red brick over the windows is run in a different alignment to make sure the curve works and fits with the material. So craftsmanship doesn't necessarily encompass the most ornate or high art, but it is understanding the material that is used and using it well. So for those 2 reasons, staff recommend that the property 52 Charlotte Street be designated to recognize the Crystal Cottage once again following restoration. So the next steps for this project are the notice of intention to designate. That falls to council. Brantford Heritage Committee has a statutory role to provide advice to council when it considers designating property. So if a notice of intention to designate is issued, that gets served on the property owner, the Ontario Heritage Trust, and notice goes in the newspaper. That starts a 30-day objection period. Anyone can make an objection. Objections are referred to council. Council then has the ability to choose to proceed or to issue a notice of withdrawal. That again is a right reserved to council. Anyone can object, but it is not a binding, stop to the process. The same timeline to pass a designation bylaw applies. Any objections are just considered in that same timeline. So 90 days after 30 days, you get 120. Bylaw adoption is the next step after any objections are considered. If council wants to proceed, we will use that example for the rest of this. So bylaw adoption, again, we have a notice of the bylaw being passed. That's served on the owner, the Ontario Heritage Trust, and then it's placed in a newspaper as well. That starts a second 30-day appeal period set out in the Act. In this stage, appeal is served on the city, the clerk, and the Ontario Land Tribunal. That is a binding decision. If there is no appeal, then the bylaw is registered on title by the city clerk. The property is designated. So recommendation to the committee is that the report be received, and then the committee's comments will be included in staff's future report to committee of the whole planning and administration. We will be targeting the January cycle. That concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you. All right. Does anyone from committee have any questions? Staff?
So the bylaw will be completely rewritten based on what you've identified from a more recent review of the attributes.
Yes. Yeah, it'll be a brand new designation bylaw under the Heritage Act as it reads today.
Okay, and we would be presented that in January? Is that the?
So the Heritage attributes are already attached to the report.
Okay.
The process would be council makes a decision to issue notice. We use that draft list of heritage attributes, and then hopefully there are no objections, and we can place the bylaw on the first available council meeting. I don't think we need to come back to committee just to draft the bylaw. That's implementing all the information that's in the report.
Nathan?
You mentioned, Patrick, that there are new regulations involving different buildings. Can you speak a bit more to that?
Yeah, so those actually relate to applications under section 34, which is demolition. They're not part of the section 29 designation rules, but there's a process. If an application for demolition of an individual property is made, the proposal is to relocate the building, heritage attributes are relocated. Council determines if the original property still has heritage value. If not, it would repeal the bylaw. But it also has the ability to determine if the new property has heritage value and can then designate that new property. So it's probably what we would have followed if the demolition application were presented today and it was approved by council. There would be now a process to say, okay, under this regulation, now there's a determination made. Does this new property have value? We're using the old version, so we can still designate the property individually.
So the regulation is new or new?
Circa 2021.
And thank you. And through you, Chair, just because it's been moved there, so as a neighborhood concern, of course, everybody knew it was coming. So it's, anybody who's in that area should be fully aware that we're designating this. Has there been, or was there any concern at the time that we were moving potentially designated property there? From any neighborhood, like any neighbor concerns?
I didn't hear any concerns about it being relocated. I did hear concerns more specific just to the process, like how long the road would have to be closed or the extent of the road closure, like block to block. But no one was concerned that a building is being moved or anything.
Because it does end up affecting neighbors, so just, it's perfect that it's there and everybody's happy about it, so that's good.
Is there any other questions of staff? Oh, Deb?
Given Nathan's more in-depth research of the date of the Crystal Cottage, how is that going to play out with the new bylaw and the existing plaque that's still on the building.
The plaque was never removed, but we would have an opportunity to revisit that date.
Okay.
Maybe I have a question. Okay. Because designations, I think sometimes we include the history of the place, right? Like who might have lived there at some point if they were significant.
So through the chair, we didn't have that information when the property was designated in 1985, and then we were requested to, now that the restoration was done, to start the process for designation. We could look into that.
Well, because.
And like, as far as updating the bylaw, but the value that was recognized in the 80s was the architectural value rather than the associated value with an individual. I would probably spend a lot more time looking into, is there a mortgage on title, who, if we have the information, we just have to get this time to get this report on this agenda and start the process. We were looking at the architectural value that was still there once restored.
We'll save the comment. Is there any other questions of staff? Okay. All right. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Can I have a mover and seconder for the motion? Moved by Tamara and second by Mandy or Councilor Salmon. Sorry. All right. And then does the committee have any comments they would like to add for this one? Councilor Salmon?
So I just wanted to make a comment. I'm not sure that needs to be added to our comments, but I just wanted to just comment that it's been beautifully restored, and I wanted to thank the owners for coming forward to have it designated. I think that that's very encouraging, and they've done a wonderful job.
Okay. And is there anyone else that wants to provide any comments? No. If I can. Okay. One thing in regards to potentially including in the designation information might be worth looking into, just because my own stuff I looked into before in land registry, it might have been, I think, Eliza Marquis, who was the daughter, I think, of the original Dr. Marquis family. That is very significant, and she herself may have had a lot of significance as far as various things she may have been involved in, because I thought I saw her information on that land registry. I could be wrong, but I would like to see that looked at. And I just wanted to say that I came in this Heritage Committee in 2011, but everyone I've known before, throughout all the different years, and Heritage Committees of the past, even the Architectural Conservancy from the 70s, if not 60s through the 90s or 80s, everyone had lovingly hoped this building was one that would last a very long time. So the fact that it was moved, and things went as they went, but the fact that it was moved and was lovingly restored, I feel like it's also been lovingly restored in a way that the original builder did. And I think that speaks for a lot of what can happen if people really give these buildings of significance in Brantford a chance. And I just want to put that in comment because I think it's important. And Westaway, I know, was one that really had concerns about this building for a very long time. And I think she and many other past heritage advocates would be very happy and very thankful. And no one else has any comments?
Sorry, through the chair, the two comments that I have for the motion to be forwarded to council are basically thanking the owner for coming forward and for the designation and the work on the property. And the other one was the inclusion of the individual or family that lived in the property.
Could we find that as maybe further research, just to see if there's something of significance that maybe should be included there? Check the land registry. All right, so everyone knows what we're voting in favor of? All right, so show of hands if you're in favor. All right, and does anyone oppose? And that carries unanimously.
Sitting in the dark out there.
Lights went out.
Yes.
All right, so we're moving on to item 4.5, and that's nominations for recognition on Prominence Point and employment of committee members to the Prominence Point Subcommittee. And I will now call upon city staff to speak to this item. As a reminder, you will have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Through chair to the committee members, we have received a number of nominees for recognition on Prominence Point. Traditionally, we provide the nomination packages to the committee, and that is referred to a subcommittee of heritage committee members. That's the Prominence Point Subcommittee. And they review the packages in more detail. They discuss, deliberate, and will ultimately recommend a nominee to actually be inducted into the Prominence Point Monument. Looking at the terms of reference, I believe it specifies that members are appointed for 1 year from the Heritage Committee. So through this report, it's really just more of a referral report and to appoint the subcommittee members. So we'll be looking for committee members here who'd like to volunteer to do a little bit more sort of review and research of the nomination packages.
Okay. Is there any questions for staff? Beth?
So you put all these together or?
No, they are submitted by individuals. So we actually
Okay.
have a form on our website now. So appendices D and E, those are the submission packages that were put through the website and
Okay.
the nomination form. And the first two were provided sort of in hard copy. So the only real work I did was to have to try and collate all those images through the scanner and make the file not exorbitantly large. Which was a challenge in and of itself. But,
Yeah, because they're quite extensive. I was impressed.
Any other questions of staff? No? Okay, can I please have a mover and a seconder on this motion? Dan, and seconded by Dan. Okay. All right, so then, who on the Heritage Committee wants to be considered for the Prominence Point Subcommittee? Mandy?
Yeah, because I thought I already was, but that's the thing is that you said it's only for a year, so that's what happened. So yes, I'm still interested.
Okay, great.
I have a question.
Yeah, okay.
Can you describe more what's entailed?
So through the chair, once the members are appointed to the subcommittee, staff would canvass those members via email for a date that works for them. We hold a subcommittee meeting where the subcommittee can then discuss the nomination package. So you would review them on your own time. It's not part of the Heritage Committee discussion further just yet. But you review those packages, you come to the meeting, and then as a subcommittee, discuss the nominees put forward, who you feel meets the criteria for recognizing on Prominence Point. I think in prior years, there's been a bit of a debate about, okay, yeah, do we feel there's enough maybe information to support recognition of this criterion or that. But ultimately, after that meeting, if you can come to an agreement, I believe it's a 2/3 majority in that meeting on who to nominate, then the subcommittee just reports back. Usually a simple report staff put together for the committee saying, we met on this date, consider these nomination packages, and believes this is the individual who's worth inducting to Prominence Point under this criteria. And that goes back here to Heritage Committee. The subcommittee members will sort of provide that update to the committee members here. And then ultimately, Heritage Committee makes that recommendation out through the council. Council makes a decision.
All right, is there anyone else then that's interested?
How many do we need? I was on this one a few years ago too. I don't think we ever met.
So it's
Yeah.
5 members in
Right.
the terms of preference.
Oh, there you go.
So Tamara,
Need five, sure.
anyone else?
We've
Dan? What do we got so far? 4?
2 more.
One on the screen.
One on the screen? Oh, Councillor Sullivan? And Sandra? Too many? Oh, well then. So does that mean we have to vote on it?
So
That's the your hand was up a little bit too.
That had her hand up too, I know.
Yeah.
through the chair, then the numbers I have in case that I capture them incorrectly. Councillor Sample, Nathan, Tamara, Dan, Councillor Sullivan, and Sandra.
How many do we need?
But yeah, so the subcommittee mandate, so being a subcommittee of Heritage Committee, the subcommittee mandate can be amended by Heritage Committee. You could have more. It does say a total of 5 members, including the member of council appointed to the committee. We have 2 council appointees. I don't know that it's going to be something that we should be too concerned about. If we want, if Bay's fine with 6 members, I don't think it will be an issue.
Hi, Dan?
Is there a reason why it's an odd number and not even?
Odd number, just break ties.
Yeah.
Oh. All right, so,
I'm fine with 6 members.
yeah, is everyone on the committee fine with 6 members?
I will bow
Alright.
out if it makes it easier.
Wait,
Both said opposite things. I said, can we add a 7th to make it an odd number? And he offered to withdraw, so I didn't know where we want to go.
so which? Michael, do the job? Okay.
And is that my?
So what I have is Councillor Samuel, Nathan, Tamara, Dan, and Sandra. And am I now missing anyone? Bev?
It's okay. You have 5, so that works. Just
So we're good? Okay. All right, so in that case, is there any discussion or any other questions or anything else? No? Okay. So in that case, all those that are in favor of having Councillor Samuel, Nathan, Tamara, Dan, and Sandra be on the subcommittee for Prominence Point. All those in favor? All right, and is there any opposed?
Sorry, for the chair to member Wilson, was your voting affirmative or in the negative? Affirmative, okay, thank you.
Affirmative. Thank you. Sorry about
All
that.
right. That's all right. All right, so it's carried unanimously. All right, so item 4.6. Additional 2025 Brantford Heritage Committee priorities. I will now call on city staff to speak to this item. As a reminder, you have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Thank you, Chair. So, through Chair, the committee will recall the priorities were brought forward at the last meeting. Just an overview, and the committee, considering some of the options for additional priorities, referred that report back to staff. So it was the following item be referred back to staff for inclusion of an additional goal related to education and heritage awareness. So the matter really at the discussion was an additional committee priority looking at reviewing and recommending strategies for heritage education more broadly in the community, but also talking about the commemoration of some of the neighborhoods that were consulted with respect to being a heritage district. So the appendix A to this report, you can look at the original report linked through report 2024-722, but appendix A to the report in front of the committee tonight includes all the same priorities from last month, with the addition of one additional number 5, that's historic research and heritage education. So this project would see members of the committee conduct historic research on selected neighborhoods drawn from those consulted for interest in becoming a heritage conservation district. This project will also consider other strategies to raise awareness of community history and heritage recognition. A subcommittee may be established to oversee this priority. So just on that note, the recommendations in the staff report just set that up as sort of a default state that we have a resolution that can be put on the floor to nominate committee members to a second subcommittee, and also to shortlist a number of neighborhoods. Staff might recommend 1 or 2 to start, maybe, and then how that goes in future years would be that other neighborhoods from the list of potential heritage district neighborhoods or other parts of the city, or even just different topics of heritage nature. As our staff involvement in this goal would be to assist with giving you our existing research, the examples of the display boards that we put together for the shortlisted neighborhoods, and then acting as a general resources to the committee members or subcommittee members about that existing information collected through the HCD project, and then any copies of existing education material prepared by the city. So one of the things that was discussed was, I believe, mail-outs, for example, about the grant program, making that something more well-known. And it is something we do mail-outs yearly on the grant program, so material like that. Committee members would actually then discussing the neighborhoods, maybe using the existing material we have, adding ideas to that, and then when provided back to staff, we could do like a quick layout. We sort of have the files, right, for meeting display boards. We know what sizes of font work for readability. We have our arts and culture staff we can refer to and say, you know, is this level of detail too much? Does it look like something could be sort of expanded on here? Should this be a separate board entirely based on what's been provided? And then sort of working with the committee members that way. There's no budget for this in 2025, but if we can draft up a number of boards, it would be easy then to go to council and say, here is a actual cost to implement this that is more concrete. It might be easier to quantify in a budget request rather than saying we'd like $5,000 or $10,000 and we don't know how that will be allocated yet. So that could be a next year component. That's the update.
Okay. Councilor Sammer?
Thank you through you, Chair. My question is, well, first I wanted to say that I think that appreciate the fact that staff captured our comments from last time really well. I think they captured everything we wanted to see in this priority. And I did have a question though, are there specific recommendations about which neighborhoods you think that should go on the list? Am I missing that in the report or?
No, we didn't recommend that in the report. Purely based on looking at the neighborhoods we consulted and having a clear sort of neighborhood or area history. The two that stand out to me are going to be Waterloo Court and Lansdowne Park Estates. That's not to say other neighborhoods won't have history, but like we talked about in those prior reports on the district study, the wartime housing near the factories is slightly different. It is during the war, the victory housing. And then other areas like parts of Lansdowne Park were post-war victory housing. So those are two different types of stories that could be told. There may be a broader opportunity because of the history of Eagle Place to do a broader project. I mean, that's like another year's priority is telling the story of Eagle Place and bringing in the industrial history, the wartime housing, Erie Avenue, but maybe part of a larger, broader look at where plaques and history could be sort of installed in the area. And then, if smaller neighborhoods are picked for the first round, it lets committee members sort of try without having too much of a work day. Also earlier tonight, the committee talked about commemoration in downtown. That was, like, the Bluesy Street north side was one of the areas we consulted. And in the first phase report, we noted there could be, again, a broader downtown history to tell. So I wouldn't say any neighborhood's really off the table, but as far as like a more discrete history, like saying these are the limits we can talk about. The easiest ones to me look like Waterloo Court and Lansdowne Park Estates.
Okay, I just asked because it does have spots for third recommendations, so I just thought I would ask that question. And I'm interested to hear what the other committee members have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick?
I guess this is to Patrick. So we did these consultations about heritage conservation districts. So we expended all this time and energy and effort, had the mayor's encouragement, and that resulted in nothing happening. Am I correct?
Sorry, Nathan, can you talk a little bit louder?
Yeah. That we did the research and the consultations with the heritage conservation districts at the encouragement of the mayor. The staff spent a lot of time and energy and effort doing that, and our results for our efforts are nothing. Am I correct in hearing about that, other than recognizing that some areas are more interested in the history?
Again, I wouldn't say nothing, but I would say no, the districts didn't have a broad neighborhood level of support, and that's what we couldn't show to council. We do have cases in each district where owners are interested in that neighborhood history. We have cases of, in some cases, we've made contact who would like individual designation. So that is the next step, and that's in the Heritage Register, or sorry, the Heritage Districts report, and that stage of this is looking at the neighborhood recognition side of things. So building on that, we do have some of the history for some of those neighborhoods that is even more easily documented. That would be provided to the committee members. But this is actually making that commemorative signage that talks about history. So it's not nothing, but we could maybe do some more research with more time on a smaller subset of the neighborhoods and make better signage than if we just copied our display boards.
And then with priority one, which is the register alternatives, we're talking about designating certain properties. And then we had that other report tonight with the downtown streetscaping, which identified a whole bunch more. So is 2 to 3 properties sufficient, given our list is quite long?
Also, some of those properties in downtown are listed properties. Some didn't make the cutoff to be listed. If you recall, with phase 1 report, we did have a property owner in the downtown that was open to talking more about individual designation. So I don't know that, and I think it'll give it too soon to say, can we do 4 or 5 properties a year? I don't know yet. But again, that's the goal. We can't go past it. It's not a limit. We're not going to say, oh, we've done 3 properties. We're not doing any more this year. But we'll be talking to all those others who said they like the idea of a district and then seeing if they're interested in individual designation. And we're still going to be reaching out to all the group listed properties to sort of gauge the level of interest there, talk about designation, have those conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Okay. In that case. Oh, sorry. May I please have a seconder, or sorry, mover? And a second. So Beth moved and seconded by Nathan. All right. Okay.
For clause B, I definitely would like to see the Waterloo Court, the Lansdowne, as 2 of the neighborhoods to be considered. And I also think that the Victory House would make the third one potentially for priority one five.
And is there anyone else? All right. Okay, so we're looking for Brantford Heritage Committee members to be appointed then to the research subcommittee. So then, oh, pardon me. Councilor.
So I just had a question. So, with Nathan, suggesting that the Victory housing be included, I'm wondering if it, would make any sense to, do something that is more neighborhood-wide for that area, since there was a lot of interest in Uriah history as well. Unless I'm wrong, I thought there was a lot of people that was interested in the history portion of that as well.
I think we had a decent turnout for that one, and the results were a little bit more mixed, but I think it might have been that gradual growth of Erie Avenue. Again, this is up to the committee and the neighborhoods that you would like to do this year, or 2025, I mean. So by all means, you could do all of them. You could do all of Eagle Place and Waterloo Court and Lansdowne Park. You could just do two. Like it's up to the committee. If you would like to expand that scope, that's the committee's choice.
So at this time, I'm just gonna pose that question, noting that I do live in Eagle Place, so therefore not in either Macon area or the Victory housing areas, but I just would rather leave that up to the committee, but I just wanted to ask that question.
Could we combine the two, like the Victory housing and the Eagle Place until one kind of broader?
If the committee wants to, and again, even the subcommittee part is optional. You could resolve just to do it at the full committee level right now. Perhaps reintroduce something later on if you realize, oh, we maybe do want a subcommittee. I just wanted to put the resolutions there. So again, it's what the committee members want to put forward, so.
Amenable to, that we do it in one.
I'm comfortable with whatever the committee wants to do.
So, sounds very supportive from the committee for that. Okay.
Sure. So through the chair, the three areas that I have identified are Waterloo Court, Lansdowne Park State, and Victoria Housing and Eagle Place. Combined, that's one.
All right, and okay. And do we then have members to point into the research subcommittee for this? Anyone that wants to? Beth? Or anybody else?
So I have a question. Do we want to do a subcommittee or do we want to do this as the full heritage committee?
That's a good question.
That would be a question I would pose because there's a lot more of us if we include everybody, if they're willing.
Everybody sounds amazing.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, I like doing it as a community as a whole. Yeah, gives more people opportunity for it, but maybe there's someone who has additional information that someone on the team may not have.
Maybe I just have a question. How does that work then? Would that just be added like a specific item on our agenda for each?
The chair, I might recommend that that's not every agenda, but let's say every other month. There's big staff can just add a standing memo or a copy of a memo. We just keep adding to the agenda every other month. It says here's information provided by committee members. And then again, it's every even numbered month, so February, April, 2, 4, 6, 8 throughout the year. There's an item on the agenda that members can speak to. Members would provide any research they want to staff just to append. That way it's still part of the public record. Here's the research that was done, the information found, and then the members can go around on that item and speak to what they put on that report in a given month. But we did have before monthly sort of flow downloading updates from different subcommittees, and oftentimes without a clear schedule, we saw there are no subcommittee updates this month. We also had 6 different subcommittees. There was a lot of at the time. So I think maybe with, Providence Point is ad hoc. It meets for that purpose. And that's why it's reappointed every year. Won't be as much competition, but if there's actually an item every 2 months, that might encourage members to know, I don't have to worry this month. I can add something next month. Here's what I have.
So that's something that could be like flagged with staff that to make sure that,
Yep.
just in case we forget or
Yep.
not here or
And
something.
it doesn't have to be, but like maybe the expectation is, okay, again, every even numbered month, if you can try to find something to add to that memo, and you'll just compile it for the committee. So it's in the report package, or you check the package for everyone to see.
Any other questions or anything at this point for this? I did have one, sorry, just because it was in the Heritage Committee priorities, I think there's something mentioned in there, at least in the last meeting, that, so I didn't know if it fits, might not be. Question is about the heritage inventory. I know based on all of the consultation that went on with different heritage districts, one thing that seemed loudly clear is the heritage inventory we have on the city's website, which is really not accessible, very hard to find, almost hidden. That is a resource we won awards for. Tons of money was spent on it. We were, I think, the first municipality to have our own heritage inventory. And it is an incredible resource that should be public. So I'm wondering if that somehow could be included, or if it is already kind of included, since it's come in discussion before in regards to education and whatnot, that should be going forward something that's made available, but understanding it is completely separate from the register, because it is, and there was confusion. But as well, there used to be a landing page that explained what heritage designation is, what it isn't, and also how to properly view that information. If I can say one thing, just because I wanted that on record. Ever since I've been on the Heritage Committee since 2011, at the time I had asked different times for direction to have Sid Bolton help convert that to a format that would be accessible. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, it didn't ever come to be. But with all the technology now, there's got to be a way to do it. Probably better now than we had before. So I don't know if that's in order.
I can speak to that and just give an update. So it was our IT, I think now he's your manager director. He was involved with making the inventory. He is looking to make it part of our open data package. So we have an offline copy. It's all there. It's in PDF, but it's not accessible. And that's why it could not be on the website. It is something they're looking to make part of open data with the information. We could look at doing that. And again, we could start that neighborhood by neighborhood, perhaps or street by street. That could be part of the historic research and education mandate if the committee really wanted it. I'm not leading making it open data because it is a back end issue for our IT software and hardware. We can follow up with the manager of IT or director. So again, I'm hoping I'm not demoting him intentionally here. I can follow up with him and see if there's a work plan for that. And we can put that update maybe at a future committee meeting.
If I can, one other thing, I do have 3 books. They are the heritage inventory of certain portions of downtown. There was physical copies at one time. I bought them secondhand from the library or bookstore in London, Ontario, a couple of years, actually during the pandemic. So I didn't know if there's still the physical bound copies somewhere too or not, that the library might have or something, or somewhere in the
Library
archives.
Library archives may have. I'd have to look for those.
And I think
Just to bolster what Patrick was saying, I remember being copied up, from Zach saying that they were working on it. So, I hope that isn't something that's falling off the radar. And yeah, I definitely think like maybe a street by street approach makes it easier to manage, because there's some streets in there that can be very valuable to have, and other streets perhaps not as valuable to have that are in there, because they did a whole bunch of properties. I remember, and there were some of them that were very, very blank, a lot of them. But other areas like the downtown, we knew a lot more about, that's for sure.
Just for my reference, I Googled Brantford Heritage and like the page comes up on the Brantford.ca page, and it does list all the properties. It's just not very friendly and interactive, that's all. So I don't know if there's some way that they did just redo the entire official plan and made that interactive as far as maps and stuff like that goes. So I'm sure that the tech department is the last thing they want to hear from is the Heritage Committee, but that may be something that, you know, going forward could be a suggestion brought towards the tech department to say, listen, we already have this whole interactive map, of the city going on. Maybe we could start adding the properties that are designated as well in there.
Is
it?
That can be part, we can look
You
into
know what I
that as
mean?
well.
I'm sure there's a lot going.
There, I think will be it'll be up to the website package that is
Yeah.
purchased, like what the code can do.
Right.
We're also moving to buildbrantford.ca for heritage and planning matters.
Okay.
And Brantford.ca still has everything else. But if you go to the planning section, I do see now that they never took down the old register page, even though they were told to. So we'll fix that. We have it fully moved over to the new site. We are updating Brantford.ca/heritage. It should take you to the new site and have more information there.
Yeah,
than
there is
just the
quite a bit,
register page.
yeah. But you have to dig for it a little bit, so, but Google's my friend.
A while ago, we had a presentation about the new zoning bylaw that was coming out. And they put it up on the screen and there was maps, interactive maps. And we had suggested to them that if you were to click on the Crystal Cottage, it would come up listed or designated dates and all kinds of stuff. That is that not what we're trying to work towards?
I don't know what the work plan is as far as making public facing mapping, just because heritage is not the only layer that would be beneficial to have on an interactive map.
But that was a public facing
yes,
thing.
and it's still there, yeah, on buildbrantford.ca, we do still have the interactive zoning map, but again, I think there's what data, you know, converting that data so it is public facing and it's scrubbed of any sensitive information. I don't have, you know, that list of layers that will be going live or when, and I don't know in that list where I could maybe slot heritage. I have mentioned it internally too to other colleagues that when we get this external mapping up, it will be nice to have the designated properties on there and the listed properties.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, listed properties are going to be temporary, but
yeah.
Just one other thing, because it did come up recently. We had talked at one time. Someone, maybe Lisa and I, went to the Heritage Conference, and at that Heritage Conference, they talked about using a drone to capture heritage buildings. And I was at a public consultation for the county regarding their downtown projects, similar to what's happening in downtown Brantford. And I had a discussion with their director or manager of IT, and she said, yeah, I do that all the time. They threw a drone on my desk, told me to learn how to fly it, and she said I can do a scan of a building in about half an hour, and then with LiDAR precision, laser precision, and she could go back out, fly it again, and notice the difference or the deterioration. Then she says it takes a couple hours of computing time, which you don't have to watch it, and then there's like half an hour processing. So it takes about an hour to do heritage building of human time. So it's just something that I want to bring back and remind people that is a technology that we may want to consider using going forward to help us with our heritage. You know, recognizing our heritage buildings we would be able to do that with the Crystal Cottage too. We would be able to see it with laser precision, every little thing that went on.
Oh, easy.
Yeah,
I know with the county, with the drone, there was talks of any, on their downtown, or they had started to notice changes of features missing off buildings or being changed on buildings, so that they would have drone footage of the downtown area, so that it was publicly on the website, so that people could go in and look at their building and know that it's been documented, so that they wouldn't make the changes, rather than, you know, nobody's gonna notice type of thing. So that's part of the drone footage as well.
that's some great information. Okay. I think we've had a pretty good discussion with this. Probably went a little off things, but I think it was an important discussion, important information to have out there. So in this case, we've decided then that we're not going to have the subcommittee, then all of that research will just be coming to committee. So in that case,
So through the chair, we're gonna be voting on clause A and B. Clause C is automatically struck from the recommendation. Since there is no gonna be a subcommittee form, no need to appoint any members. So we're gonna be only voting on clause A and B. Clause B will be including, as I said before, Waterloo Court, Lansdowne Park Estate, and Victoria Housing and Eagle Place areas, both of those together.
all right, in that case, all those that are in favor of this motion, please say yes. And is there anyone opposed? None, let's carry unanimously. We're on 4.7. Review of heritage procedures and delegated authority. I'll call upon city staff to to speak to this item. As a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Thank you, Chair. This is going to be more discussing what's in the report than truly beneficial presentations. These are when you have lots of pictures, like the heritage alterations or a list of heritage attributes, but maybe just to help sort of focus what I'm talking about to make it a bit more understandable, I will have just some very simple slides to put up. Just once that loads. But the committee, it's certainly before my time. By default process, the Heritage Act lets applicants, property owners apply to the council of a municipality and request permission. In 2016, authority was delegated to staff and the Brantford Heritage Committee, and that helps speed up processing time for heritage permits from about 2 to 3 months down to about 1 month or even just a few days for minor alterations. But it's a 2016 bylaw. It's been almost 10 years. We felt as staff it probably should be reviewed, especially with the streamlined process we have for heritage grants. There might be some opportunities just to, again, simplify that process for applicants where they are trying to do work that aligns with heritage conservation. Just the screen share again. Sorry. So the first thing we want to talk about was major and minor alterations. The classification of it, looking at maybe harmonizing some language. I think in some places the bylaw calls them heritage permits, otherwise they're called major or minor alterations. So then just some very simple housekeeping matters like that. We're not proposing to change the types of categories, where there should be minor work that you don't need a heritage permit for, and there are major alterations which do trigger that more thorough review. Generally, the minor alteration category is your repairs and maintenance, existing feature. The exception right now is masonry repairs. You can replace with like materials, so same cladding or same roof. You can do minor works like gardening or removal of plants. So small shrubs, bushes, and trees. And some construction was allowed. The official version of the bylaw does have this annotated line saying rooftop patios. But you can construct a patio or deck in your rear yard or on a rooftop, as long as it's not visible from a street, and that doesn't technically require a heritage permit. There's also minor works like installing a utility box, hydro box, hydrometer, water lines, AC units, or satellite dishes. But anything that would remove or replace a heritage attribute, again, the things that give that property heritage value or contribute to that, or doing other works that require a permit, those are the major alterations that need the heritage permit. They come to Brantford Heritage Committee, and if staff and the committee agree, we issue a permit under delegated authority. So again, that is not proposed to be changed, what's major minor, but we're thinking as staff that there's some opportunity to streamline it a bit more. Again, if it's maintenance, if it's conservation. So mason repairs, we recommend you're putting brick, that becomes a minor alteration. Many times you've seen reports, even tonight, that generally have 4 to 5 pages, attach some submission materials and say they're looking to use an appropriate mortar and repoint brick. We've had 7 of those permit applications this year. We have had grant applicants who applied, were willing to do the work, and then when they realized they needed the heritage permit, they deferred that work to the spring season because they were getting close to winter. So again, this is where they're just looking to maintain it. This is not about removing, we've seen in one heritage permit, removing a chimney, and that chimney wasn't even called out as a heritage attribute, but they were looking to remove it. So this would be, I'm merely trying to maintain the brick or stone masonry walls of my building. So yeah, repairs. Fence construction, something else we've seen listed here as needing a heritage permit. In Brantford, the fence bylaw is dealt with our property standard staff. And I think as staff, we see a way that we can split this out. So minor alteration, fence construction, anything that is repairing a historic fence with light. It's that maintenance, that conservation work. If the new fence is constructed in a rear yard or exterior side yard, again, where we're not going to see it, likely was not original and ornate, or it wasn't a historic fence, that shouldn't have to come to the committee in our view. Again, that's just putting up a fence in compliance with the fence bylaw. And then low fences in the front yard that either comply with what's already allowed in the fence bylaw for residential properties. Commercial properties aren't governed by that. But certainly we wouldn't want anyone putting up a 2-meter noise barrier style fence on the front of their property on Brant Avenue. So there would still be a limit there, but about 1 meter, that's your sort of white picket fence. That's really not going to impact the reasons for designation, the heritage attributes. Now, that said, there are cases where it should be a major alteration and coming through Heritage Committee is warranted. So if an existing fence is a heritage attribute, let's say a cast or wrought iron fence, and someone would like to remove it, you're removing a heritage attribute, that should be a heritage permit process. Or if you're looking to build that taller, larger fence above that 1 meter height in the front yard, again, it may not impact, let's say, a historic dwelling, but at some point you say, okay, well, you are now removing that view of this designated property from the street. And that is, we recognize the exterior, we celebrate the history, but we do want those properties to be part of the community and be visible. Signs, I think we have 2 or 3 applications this year. A sign that is fully in compliance and conformity. If you comply with our sign bylaw, you don't need a sign variance. You don't need to go through other approvals. But again, fully in compliance would mean that we put this table together in our recent reports and every answer is yes. It is a 2-post sign, or it is a wall sign, and it does not obstruct any heritage attributes. Anyone who would deviate from that and still comply with the guidelines, otherwise and not trigger a variance, would come for a heritage permit. If you didn't want to comply with the regulations in the sign bylaw, of which there are regulations for signs on heritage property, you would need the heritage permit and the sign variance. So again, we do have these processes in place. We're not proposing to abandon them, but where property owners are looking to comply and be consistent with our bylaws and our guidelines, this is a better way, I think, to get them to comply. We've had, in some cases, discussions back and forth with applicants before the meeting. And it's like, this is where you do not comply with this, you will need a variance. Okay, well, I don't want to go through the variance. I will revise my sign and make sure I comply. Hey, but in this way, your sign's not consistent. And then I think one of the recent ones, we were down almost to the wire, the week the agenda went out, and we finally got the revised design back from the applicant, where it was consistent with the guidelines, it was a 2-post style, and we recommended approval, committee agreed. So having I think compliance is sort of like a softer way of getting more compliance with the guidelines. I think you can skip the permit process entirely if you are consistent and compliant. But if you want, to not follow those established rules, now you are triggering processes with a greater review. We also have something that could be moved forward. We see this line about construction of patios or decks in a rear yard and not visible from the street. That one is a bit tricky because a lot of historic properties will have side yards maybe that are uneven. And so on one side, you'll want a garage, or a new owner may want a garage. It's visible from the street. Well, okay, what if a deck exists and now that one encroaches into that side yard and you can see part of that deck from the street? What's the cutoff? 10%, 50%, 75%. So what we're looking at saying, construction of pools or detached accessory structures in a rear yard, so as defined by the zone, and where they comply with the zoning bylaw. If you want to make a larger garage or a detached dwelling unit in your backyard and you need a variance, well, yeah, there may now be an impact on the scale of that building on the historic property. That's appropriate to have that heritage permit reviewed. But again, a way to encourage people to keep their proposals in keeping with our rules, again, where they're not impacting the actual historic building. I think we'd still see, maybe where it says a patio or a deck. Well, I would think maybe I'm comfortable with a patio or a deck that is floating, it's not attached to the building. But perhaps if you are starting to alter the historic structure, that would stay a heritage permit. You want to build a patio and tie it into the rear wall of your historic dwelling, that's a heritage permit. You want to build a small floating deck in the backyard that's not impacting the historic structure. Again, if we're not going to see that from the street, or it's not going to have a big impact, a major presence, then that could maybe be stepped down. Again, we will be seeing these with sketches and drawings saying this is what we're building. Anything over about a 10 square meter or 110 square feet size needs a building permit, so they're going to be doing those drawings. And then I think for that one, like pools, we've had one this year. The pool requires a building permit, so based on the existing authority, we had to force that applicant to get a heritage permit. At the same time, they were converting a detached garage to a pool house. The detached garage was visible from the street. They weren't tearing it down fully in the building, or that wasn't the original plan, I think. They ended up having to do that. So again, that might cross that threshold and say, yeah, this is going to have an impact on the streetscape, or it's going to be visual. We've also had applicants come in and make 2-car garages that are better looking than the 1-car garage that was there before, and they chose material tastefully to blend in with the character of the historic building without detracting from it. So we can do some of that, and again, it encourages people to say you can get through this process with the city faster if you comply or you're consistent with our established guidelines. We haven't had any demolition or removal, I guess. Again, I should have retracted that. The plan originally was just alter, but it did turn to demo. But again, if you're removing a pool in the backyard, that's a permit to construct or demolish. It's an alteration to the property. Likely not going to impact the historic building, but if it does, we have that ability to refer things back through the committee process. So that's some tweaks that staff are proposing that get made. Again, committee can weigh in on that through the comments that are provided. We're not changing the major minor process, so committee will still see work, especially work that alters the historic building fabric, would still be coming through committee. The next item is supporting material. So there's a few sections in the act that said you have to submit certain things and anything a council may require. Right now, we've used our application form. That's the small section, the full written description of work, and some construction drawings, which don't always apply. That's required material per the form, but it's not actually set out in the bylaw. The 2021 regulation that was adopted to the Heritage Act, it set out very explicit requirements for individually designated properties. We're just looking to take the authority of the act and actually properly codify a list of supporting materials that we can require. We've had really good compliance with this. Applicants often say, well, what do I need? We explain, if you're doing masonry repair, you should make sure your quote says the type of mortar you're going to use or source of the brick. You know, the committee will ask you this question. You should have an answer to it up front. And again, okay, I'll go ask my mason. Or you are installing solar panels. You know, give us the details on the panels. You can, what's the attachment mechanism, even though it requires a building permit. You know it's going to follow the act or the building code. The act is there. The committee reviewed it, you know, they made sure their solar panels were installed at the rear of the property, and they had a roof that could bear the weight because it was a slate roof before. So what do we need? We're proposing that we actually just codify a list that we can now point to. If there are disputes, that gives the city a little bit more authority to say, no, this is what the committee and possibly council do need to understand the work you're doing. To have some flexibility, we refer to the official plan. So if there's a development application tied into a heritage permit, all those same studies can then be required so that permits aren't just submitted without proper support. Oftentimes they will be dealing with similar things anyway, but also giving the manager long-range planning that option to specify and impose a requirement for certain documents. You'll see in the report I mentioned, for example, a building condition report. So if we see a demolition application and the applicant says, oh, the building's too far gone, it has to come down. Okay, you can make that application, you have that right. We want to see a building condition assessment that clearly quantifies what has gone wrong. And that can make that way the committee can make an informed decision to say, as regrettable as it might be, we can clearly see in this recognized type of study, this building is compromised. We may support that, the demolition. But if it's just conjecture, we can say, well, no, this is premature. You know, provide a building condition assessment that would actually show that this property is compromised. Again, for work that actually is maintenance, but maybe it's a bit above and beyond what is appropriate for delegated authority to staff. Give us that code or estimate work, give us the work plan so that we can show the committee and they can understand your project. Again, so that is just, you don't need this because someone has done something that caught us flat-footed. It's good to have in place beforehand. We're doing a procedure review. And the third procedural change, the Heritage Act allows, so it requires notice goes in a newspaper when we do various uses of authority. There's also new sections were added that say a committee can adopt the policy and that will suffice anywhere the Heritage Act requires notice to go in the paper. So these are just two examples. A number of municipalities have done this. So the one on the left is Hamilton. That's their webpage for Heritage in Hamilton. It has designation notices. Markham goes by a date approach. They also have such a policy. And they actually have, in this case, today, they withdrew their notice of intention to designate. On December 12th, they had adoption of designation bylaws. So we just propose a policy that lets us post notice of intention to designate or any other Ontario Heritage Act notices on buildbrantford.ca/heritage, a dedicated section. If you look back at the report on designation tonight, the estimated cost for designation was about $1,400. That's because the expositor charges about $650 for a quarter page plus ad. Some municipalities like Oakville that have been doing a lot of designation, they feel they've saved tens of thousands of dollars. And if every designation does cost $1,400, that is going to be a hit to our budget in our department for mail out, for postage, for notices. So that would be a sort of an upset limit where we have to go back to council and say, could we have some more money to do designation? If we could post it on our website, that drops that to almost zero. All we're paying for is registering our title and possibly couriers. We can also serve notice via email to the trust. It's really then a matter of just if the owner has an email they've given us or not. So that would be something we're looking to do as well. That wouldn't be a long policy, but that's something we do. So the next steps really for staff is just to confirm the list of bylaws and chapters we're going to be amending. So our existing delegated authority is bylaw 148/2016, just for heritage permits. Our corporate policy manual would be for adding the notice in the paper, likely also dealing with the delegation of the authority to the manager and list of studies. Municipal code, chapter 15, which is the procedure manual. I don't know that we need to amend chapter 26 for the board's advisory committee, so that's what governs this committee. But just in case we listed it, then we'll work with clerks and legal to make sure we don't miss any bylaws. If the committee is comfortable with this list of amendments, then we might just save time, take what's in this report and just turn it into those amending policies and bring it straight to council. However, if the committee has concerns or would like to see other things added, if there's questions about what's proposed here, we could bring something back before it goes to council, but it would just add possibly an extra month or two, just to have time to draft up and look into other stuff. So we can probably move what's in this report reasonably quickly, like Q1 2025, but we may look at early Q2 if the committee does want to see further information or wants to see the scope back anyway. That concludes the presentation for me. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Can I then? All right, any committee members have questions? For Dan?
I love the whole thing, other than minor changes like materials. I think that a lot of people have different ideas about like materials, whereas somebody has a white picket fence, but they want to replace it with skids standing up, with skids. As long as they're under that 1 meter, whatever it is.
So through the chair, new fences that are not heritage attributes, that are not historic, we wouldn't have a material control there as much. But if you have, let's say, a board and batten house, that is where to do new wooden board and batten is minor alteration. But if you go to aluminum siding, that's a material change that would trigger a heritage permit. So if we're talking about fences, it wouldn't be as regimented, but it would certainly be triggered for the main historic building if they change material. So just to clarify.
It just worries me with the whole like material.
Yeah, so you see in your example, if they did like vinyl board and batten and we're replacing it, that would come before us.
That would not. Okay. To the sheriff, then they would have an option through that to try and explain to the community what they've looked at, if this might be the most light material they can find to a historic profile. And it gives them that option. But again, if they were just doing wood, board and batten, they have the same profile as they have the batten strips, then they're restoring or maintaining their heritage attribute. They don't need the permit in that case.
And then I just want to make sure that I understand properly in what you said. In the masonry appears painting masonry or other features that are previously unpainted and the construction of fences are considered to be major alterations. So if we had an unpainted brick building and someone wanted to paint it, that would be a major alteration. Yes. And then similarly with some of our problems that we've had where someone says, oh, I want to demo this thing. And I think often Dan asks, do you have an engineer's report? And we get a kind of wonky answer. So with this update, the director, the manager of long range planning would have the ability to say, hey, give us an engineer's report, and then that will come to us. So it's not the committee asking for it.
The night of, it is something they have already provided. And if it says, here are all these, like, we'll say legitimate structural concerns, the staff report will highlight that and refer to that report in the, which would be the appendix.
Yeah.
So it also highlight all the, let's say, legitimate issues.
Great. Like it.
Is any first time? Dan,
Is there any way to add, I guess it would be major, it could be minor as well, but anything to do with salvage from projects that people are doing to help protect the salvage from the city or for the city?
Yeah, so through the chair, that if the committee was looking to encourage when demolition occurs, that material be salvaged, that would be probably when those applications come through, because this would be establishing the authority like before they submit. Like, what are they submitting to the city to review, for us to review the application? But when the decision is made, that's where there's authority to say like, okay, as a condition, you need to further do this study. Like, someone's building something that needs a variance, the condition can be, we approve the permit subject to the variance also being issued. And if they don't get one, they don't get either of them, right? So again, if you want something salvaged, that would be something to encourage when an application actually comes through. Are you thinking something like a sort of like a salvage plan or something?
Yeah, I'm hoping that one day that we do that, any major renovation permit comes in, any demolition permit comes in, and that they have to come with an actual salvage plan of how, and to have somebody come through the building to determine which pieces have to be salvaged and the direction that that salvage is gonna go when it comes out.
That might be something that's easier to do when the applications actually come in. Because once the condition's imposed, they can still work on addressing that condition before the permit's issued. Like, again, the permit is issued subject to this being addressed. So we're waiting for them to address the condition before the permit is given to them.
When somebody takes out a demolition permit, they have to sign off or get signed off, the gas, the hydro and all that. And a salvage.
Yeah, something
that should be on there as well to be checked off that it's, somebody's gone through the building and looked at what needs to be saved.
Yeah, I think, again, because we're looking at what gets submitted to us up front. I think that would be more case by case when they actually come through. Because
unless it was part of the demolition permit application right from the start, rather than just ask for it after. You know, it's just
I'm just a little wary of this masonry repairs be reclassified as minor. If you look at the case of the Crystal Cottage, that was a substantial masonry repair. And to not have assurance beyond just staff that the committee's had a chance to view what's being considered. Like, where do you draw the line between what's a minor masonry repair, pointing to rebricking and doing a substantial area of the structure? Because
presumably something larger, they're going to be applying for the grant, and that would come before committee, right? The grants that are over,
that would catch that.
yeah, the $7,500 grants and below, but anything above that, the 20,000, those are going to be the larger projects.
Okay.
So that's one way.
That works.
I suspect most homes aren't gonna get that far, but I think there was talk in the original report that this would be reviewed more frequently. This
So
delegated authority, so we're reviewing this now, doesn't
It's
mean
a flexible.
doesn't mean it's like locked in stone for another 10 years. We can aim to do it more frequently. You know, I'm at the point where I've had 5 years of using the delegated authority. So I can see where, okay, yeah, what are like the simple routine projects where they've kind of satisfied that they're doing maintenance, it's not major work. And they could move ahead, they've demonstrated it, but we do need to wait for the meeting for the permit. And again, it's really only the mason, but we could set, let's say, a review in 3 years. We could make it part of the policy that, yeah, it's reviewed every so often with the committee, maybe not needing to amend the bylaw, but yeah, come back to, okay, is that still too much? That's delegated, it should be scaled back. We could also look at making, again, some guidelines for applicants, like if you're doing masonry repair, look for these things or ask your mason about this. And then down the road, once you've established those guidelines, anything above a threshold, we could always say, yeah, maybe this should go back to committee. Again, if they're removing an ornate chimney, if they're removing a heritage attribute, doesn't matter what that work would otherwise be, that's gonna be something the committee sees. So, you know, you could repair this chimney with the appropriate mortar, and then we can approve you like here and now. Essentially, you've given me once you give me the quote, and it shows that. If you want to demolish it, you need to make a heritage permit application. We're going to need to see some photos of the condition of that chimney. So now they're renting a boom lift or some scaffolding to get up there. They're documenting why it's in that condition. So it becomes, again, a bit of an incentive to do the right conservation work up front and not leave things until they need to demolish. So.
Sorry, I got one more thing. Under the whole project of the Crystal Cottage, and I'm sure that this may have some bearing on other people and their brickwork and their whatever, but for us to do structural brickwork, double brick house, no building permit was required. For me to build a 50 square foot deck in the back of my yard, I had to fight to get a building permit. I think there's something missing there from major brickwork and at least building permits. Never mind the heritage and all the order, but actual building permit of getting inspected.
Not building code, I can't speak.
I know. I just think that we're missing something with that. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but I just know that we're missing something.
We could look at further defining major brickwork and add that as a category. Let's say major reconstruction and major brick repair. And then maybe through 2025, staff can bring forward some kind of example like guidelines that we post on our website. And then we can say like, okay, now let's talk about that major brickwork concept. What is major? Is it, you know, you're taking down the double brick wall and it's to rebuild it?
At some point, it has to trigger a building permit.
Is there anyone else that has any? Okay, I have a few. I'm not quite sure of the year. I know that was on the committee back then. Nathan might have been. We had a completely different chair and vice chair. We did have I think it's the same thing, the delegation of authority. At the time, we had a council rep who was very encouraging of it. Also, the same council rep that always discouraged me asking about engineer's report structurally. So the concern I have is that was supposed to come back to us a long time ago for review. We were promised that would come back for review. I know I forgot, probably other members forgot. But one thing that changed significantly, I thought, if I remember correctly, that might remember, it was the routine demolition of residential properties. So at the time, we didn't have the heritage register. We had the heritage inventory, which kind of brought us involved. But it became we lost significant buildings because they didn't come to committee because it was considered routine demolition because you went from residential to residential of a certain, I don't know if it's footprint, but I remember we didn't realize the gravity of what we approved as a committee at the time because we also thought it was going to come back for review. So that part I know would never come back for review, and it looks like that's still in there. So I don't know if that's even something we can look at or not. I hope we could. And
the chair, I'm
Yeah.
not familiar
it might
with the
have been
specific.
2013.
I'm not familiar with the specific property. I know. I'm not going to know for sure what property this is, so I can't really say like, oh, this is why that one got through the process. Demolition control is a planning act process, and it's purely about dwelling units. That's all it cares about. And generally, you know, we realized we were using it one way, but it wasn't aligned with its purpose, which makes it tricky when we're using that authority. But that was the whole idea, was the listing would have that automatic review of any demolition on that property. So it achieved the goal with that heritage lens. I don't know, like this part doesn't look at demolition control, again, that's a separate bylaw with separate reviews. I'd have to, again, if it's 2013, I believe after that point, when I started in 2019, we still had some demolition control come to the committee. But I would have to go look at some records for that.
It's like, from my memory, I think it was 2013. I just know that it didn't come to us as a review of the demolition control
Okay.
bylaw. It came as a delegated authority, giving staff authority to approve because it streamlined the process a lot faster.
And that one is, I'll admit, a bit trickier because it is inherently demolition related. Not in this package, nothing demolition related for the historic building would be delegated without committee review. I don't know the council can delegate its demolition authority under the act. Just alteration. But again, we're just looking at a very clear if it's maintenance or if it's something like accessory, like if you build a shed and it's over a certain size, you need a demolition permit to demolish it. But if it's a 10-year-old shed and there's no heritage value, again, the current structure would make them come through the heritage committee. We can very clearly see that, you know, you're demolishing an addition. That's the main building. No, that's a heritage permit. And we've also had, I think, our very first notice of intention to demolish on a listed property on Oak Street. The notice was because of a non-heritage detached garage that had to come down for a severance. So again, the report was, this is happening. Let's be clear, this is not the historic structure that's being captured in this application. We'd recommend that goes to approval. That's, again, those non-historic, you know, if it's an old coach house, we probably err on the side of caution, even if it's not called out. If it's a 10-year-old, 15, 20-year-old garage or large shed, you know, you can clearly see is not historic. You would say, okay, that is what we're getting at. But you make it an old coach house again. We have that room to say, let's bring this to the community. You know, let's jump this up. It's an accessory structure, but it's old. You know, my bad thought.
It's sort of related, might be out of order, so let me know if it is, but in regards to certain properties didn't make it to the heritage register, because we did have other e-list or something like that, various things like that. If they were known to be recognized by our committee or discussed as our committee as something we were looking into, especially with the research that was done for the heritage register itself, is that something that would be included with these things or not? Because it's not listed and it's not designated, so it's kind of up in the air.
Yeah, through the chair, it would be the latter issue. If it's not designated,
Yeah.
this package of like streamlining and updates wouldn't capture it.
I don't know, I think everything's great. I just express the same concerns that have been expressed. I think everybody has spoken that wants to speak to that. So I'm seeking a mover and a seconder for the motion. Nathan as mover, sorry. Seconded by Pat, Leon. Pat. So in that case, then we'd be submitting comments, everyone? What's that? Committee members? Submitted comments is correct. So I think a lot of things are discussed already, but that.
Just, I like Patrick's suggestion that there be consideration to have this come back to the committee after 3 years or so, just to see what's working and what's not.
Anyone else?
So they were clarifying 3 years or so?
Yeah.
So we would stop?
Yeah.
Did anyone else have any comments they wanted included? Councilor Sammer?
So I just wanted to ask, so the comments that I heard earlier about, and you explained that maybe we could look at major or minor brickwork, can you not define that in this?
I would need time to look into that and then draft it up.
Can we put that in as a recommendation then, in this, as a comment? Okay. because I think that should be captured.
And it's also something I can then clarify with the CDO, like, is there a point that a double brick wall triggers a building permit? Again, I just don't know right now, but what that threshold might be.
And in addition to that, I don't know if this would be a comment that would be included or not, but I think that looking at, like a list of materials or those kinds of things, making sure that we're doing that, or at least having something in place that if there was ever a changeover in staff, who will then have the delegated authority, those kinds of things, we're capturing that in a way that's gonna benefit the committee.
So
That's gonna be staff.
well, and delegated authority would go to the position, not the individual, I think.
Right.
So as long as someone is acting as the manager of long range planning.
I understand that, so it's kind of like saying that this committee maybe could help impact what things, like supplies and things like that we feel are good, that the staff could then, whoever is in the role, would be able to say, hey, it should be these kinds of materials that you're using, or those kinds of things, for the smaller stuff.
Could look into that. I would offer to the committee up front that could be a challenge, because it could be viewed as bonusing.
Okay.
So, I would need to look into that more before we can say we can view that and say, oh, we're okay with this brand of siding or this style, but not that.
Well, I don't think we would necessarily talk about brands, but I think like types of things. Like, I don't wanna be recommending specific companies or brands.
Sorry, then yeah, no, so if it's the same, if it's like. again,
Just sharing the knowledge
Yeah.
that people around this table will have learned, and I'm sure you have learned at this point too, and probably others, but just making sure that that's captured.
I like that.
So Councilor Samuel, you can please clarify the previous point to that, the first one?
There was differentiation between major and minor.
Yes.
In terms of,
Masonry,
right,
repair.
masonry reports, right?
Threshold for
Yeah.
major and minor.
Perfect. Sort of a question, that's fine.
Oh, Dan.
I just want it to be in there somewhere about a salvage plan. That be always on mind.
Through the chair, I actually had drafted something from your previous comments. The Brantford Heritage Committee encourages the creation of a process to salvage materials from any proposed demolition trigger at any time, trigger at the time of submission of a demolition permit.
Or major renovation.
Or major, okay. I believe that you were trying to, that the triggering point would be before the work happened, right? Or at the.
A demolition permit is different than a building permit. Yeah.
So demolition permit and building permit?
Major repairs.
Is there anyone else that might have? Maybe, I, one if not two, I was wondering if maybe like a friendly addition to yours might be emphasizing that that is environmentally sustainable, considering, so I don't know how you want to phrase that, but too much is put in the landfills, and every municipality is running out of landfill space. And most of that, is buildings that are demolished en masse, are just completely thrown. Whereas a lot more people would do restoration if they had access to the materials. I don't know how to phrase that.
Sounds good to me.
Committee. I don't have anything. Oh.
Just a comment.
Maybe in regards to the potential, so you're not listing the names of products necessarily, just like if there's an example of difference between mortar and whatnot, it has come up with this committee where it's actually been really good information that, with all due respect, some staff may not have been aware of, and even the person who's the owner of the property or developer, you name it, wasn't aware of it either. And that can save a lot of potentially having a worse restoration project in the future. if it's not done right, or like the weather and whatnot, based on the materials. So what I'm wondering is if we could have somewhere in there to maybe have, kind of maybe look at the list of materials and guidelines that maybe the Canadian Heritage Professionals, they have a longer name than that. Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals, probably, would probably have a list or something guideline wise. I think they would have something like that, considering they're professionals in that field. Maybe our staff could see if that's something we could get a guideline for, or however that works. And that might help going forward, because again, if we do have a transfer or whatever in the future of different staff, different councils, you name it, different committee members, it might be stuff that's missed, and it might be good to just have that somewhere.
We can look and see if the CHP has that.
Okay. And I think, yeah. I think that was everything.
Last year.
So, through the chair, comments that I have are, the first one is the creation of a process for salvage materials with a focus with an environmental impact focus. Keeping that in mind, the creation of some thresholds between major and minor types of repairs as well. The list of materials that would trigger a permit, a heritage permit. Also the request, and for these requests to come back to the committee, and the request of staff to get a list of, or guidelines of, from the CHCP?
CAPHC.
Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals.
Thank you, yes. For the purpose of restoration of heritage properties.
I would only just stress, just because I think it should be in there, just the part that too much is going to landfills that can be reduced. Because I think if it's in there, you might just stand out a little more.
And I'll include that on the first comment regarding the process for salvage materials.
And the review every,
Oh, yes.
3 years.
Yes, yep. Every 3 years, you mentioned, yeah, I've got that as well.
Thank you. Right. So I think we have everything. Some good discussion, good comments, and I'm sorry, I should look over there more. Is there anyone virtually that needed to add anything or anything? No, you're all good, thank you. Okay, in that case, you know what motion we're voting on? In that case, all those in favor? All right, and any opposed? And let's carry it unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we now move to consent items. Almost done. Minutes from the November 25th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Is there any changes or omissions or however that works? Anything maybe change, added, not added, correct? No? We're good? And can I have a mover for that? Tamara? And the seconder, I believe, is Pat. All right, so the minutes then from November 25th, Brantford Heritage Committee be approved. And all those in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, that's approved, carried unanimously. There's no resolutions, there's no notice of motion, and I just want to say one thing. This is my first committee meeting, chairing an entire meeting. Thank you very much for your patience. I'm sorry it took so long. Last meeting of the year, so I felt it was good to have a whole discussion. Thank you. Have a good night. Meeting's adjourned.